Through 6 games, the Miami Dolphins are the best scoring offense in the NFL, and defenses cannot stop them. In Week 3, the Dolphins scored 70 points and put the league on notice. There's one man to thank for this impressive offensive showcase, and he is none other than the head coach, Mike McDaniel. Join us today as we take a closer look at the Miami Dolphins, past and present, and how Mike McDaniel's coaching philosophy has changed the league forever. The Miami Dolphins were considered one of the best teams in the league during the 1970s. In fact, Miami would appear in 3 consecutive Super Bowls, winning 2 in a row. As the 70s came to a close, the 80s and 90s proved to offer them limited success. The Dolphins would still appear in 2 Super Bowls under the leadership of Hall of Fame quarterback Dan Marino, but unfortunately, they would still miss out on a Lombardi trophy. Entering the 2000s, success was hard to come by. With the dominant Tom Brady in the same division, Miami would continue to suffer, and in 2007, they had a 1-15 season. While they did manage to win the division in 2008, the Dolphins were never truly seen as an actual threat to the top teams in the league. To give you an idea of how bad the Dolphins were, we can just look at the season before the arrival of McDaniel. Under the leadership of then-coach Brian Flores, the Dolphins would end the season with a 9-8 record. Miami started the season 1-7. After losing 7 in a row, they miraculously won the next 7 games. But it just wasn't enough to make the playoffs, and they finished 3rd in their conference. While Xavier Howard did make the Pro Bowl, there were no other Pro Bowl caliber players on the team that were even worth mentioning. They would rank close to the bottom of the league in total offensive yards as the regular season came to a close. However, the most striking report would surface from CBS, in which Tua asked himself a very simple question during that season. Do I suck? After playing 13 games and throwing 16 TDs to 10 interceptions while putting up 2,653 yards. In fact, numerous Deshaun Watson trade rumors were also circulating, with no one in the front office or the fans truly believing Tagovailoa would be their franchise quarterback. But as rumors were swirling and roster issues came up between Dolphins owner Stephen M. Ross and Brian Flores, Miami was about to make a massive risk after firing Flores on January 10, 2022. While many viewed the third-year passer as damaged goods and an irredeemable project, McDaniel took on the task and instantly recognized that Tagovailoa needed a bit of rebuilding. After noting how shaken Tua was, McDaniel spoke about how he needed to restore his self-confidence. The new coach decided to show him a 700-play highlight tape with all his best plays. In fact, McDaniel would not only back Tua behind the scenes, but also with the media, having the following to say. This was just using intuition, that getting beat up and having your existence be completely tainted by people saying you aren't X, Y, or Z, and then on top of that, from my vantage point, I felt like he was put behind the 8 ball in a way, with basically his strengths he couldn't play to. And so, if you're not able to play to your strengths and your position, one of the reasons you've gotten there is you're an unbelievable point guard. I felt, how could he? With all the things going on, it's a lot of loud noise that you try to ignore, but people are human. It was intuition, and I started getting a little bit more confidence each and every day. You could see his personality evolve, and that's when I learned how kind of deep it was, because I'm learning his personality. Tua was also on board, and McDaniel continued by saying Tua did buy in, while focusing on the things he could ultimately control. This is what transformed Tua not only as a player, but as a human being. However, McDaniel also knew the offense needed some serious work. You see, it is rare for a 3-time All-Pro to be available on the trade market. So, if you really want that player, it'll cost you. McDaniel essentially went all in on Tyreek Hill, trading a 1st, 2nd, and 4th round pick in 2022, with 4th and 6th round picks in 2023 for the explosive 6-time Pro Bowl player. The Dolphins also acquired Mostert in 2022 through a 1-year deal after he would end the 2021 season with significant cartilage damage to his knee in San Francisco. Miami would go on to bolster their running back position by picking up Devon Achane in the 3rd round of the 2023 draft, setting them up for an attack with multiple speedsters. With Tua turning a corner and speed all over the field, how did Mike McDaniel bring it all together? It's no surprise, Mike McDaniel's offense is predicated on speed, and the Dolphins have arguably the fastest team in the NFL. with Tyreek Hill clocking a top speed of 22.07 miles per hour. However, he is not alone, and rookie running back De'Von Achane also peaked at 21.9 miles per hour during a 67-yard touchdown run. According to NFL Next Gen Stats, the top 6 fastest speeds reached in the NFL currently belong to the Miami Dolphins. Hill makes the list 3 times, with Achane making it twice, and Raheem Mostert clocking the 4th fastest speeds this season of 21.62 miles per hour. This all plays perfectly into the scheme created by McDaniel. You see, McDaniel's scheme emphasizes getting the ball to players in space and counting on them to beat defenders. In fact, the combination of all these offensive speedsters, including the unmentioned Jalen Waddle, McDaniel could develop a scheme that constantly keeps defenses worrying if they might be burned down the field. To evade press coverage, McDaniel relies on motion, often bringing either Waddle or Hill halfway across the field. Through this pre-snap motion, he would give his wide receivers a head start on opposing defenders, and as they are already the fastest in the league in their respective positions, it becomes impossible to defend. But it is perhaps the behind-the-scenes actions making the biggest differences. According to many of the players, Mike McDaniel's approach to coaching is consistent with what management and psychology researchers have long said is the most effective way to run an organization. Instead of blasting players for mistakes like the legendary Vince Lombardi, McDaniel leans more towards praise and encouragement. This methodology actually empowers his employees or players to help them change their minds instead of forcing it upon them. Simply put, McDaniel believes that rewards should be dished out and not punishment, which seems to be having a massive effect on the players and the team's chemistry. In fact, it won't be anything strange to see the Miami coach stroll out to practice and engage in a little banter, often even laughing with the players if someone has new cleats or anything out of the ordinary is picked up. From offensive scheme to team chemistry, this all culminates in 2023, when these speedsters would be unleashed to wreak havoc on NFL defenses. It all came together with an offensive explosion in Week 3 of the 2023 season. Mike McDaniel would lead the Dolphins to a historic 70-20 blowout of the Denver Broncos. In fact, the Dolphins became the first team to put up 70 or more points in the Super Bowl era. As for the offense, well, they would record 726 offensive yards, becoming the first team since 1951 to record more than 700 yards in a single game. You see, the only time this feat had been accomplished was during a 1951 game between the New York Yanks and Los Angeles Rams, when the Rams would put up 722 yards, something that many experts believe would never happen again, especially with modern defenses and technology. Thanks to the speed philosophy of Mike McDaniel and a complete lack of understanding of the Dolphins' offensive concept from the Broncos, Tyreek Hill would find himself open on most plays, essentially burning defenders with his impressive vertical speed. This would be even further compounded by the Denver defense not getting any pressure on Tua, giving him days to throw. In fact, Tua would go 23 for 26 in pass completions on the day, with 4 touchdowns, while the Dolphins would rush for more than 300 yards. De'Von Achane would average 11.3 yards per carry. It seemed as if the Broncos barely watched any of the Dolphins' game film, as everyone in the league knows you cannot give Tyreek Hill a running start. Essentially, it all came down to speed and execution, dismantling the Broncos' defensive line and putting up record numbers. It is clear that McDaniel has a different way of approaching games. Much like the Belichick golden era, we might be in for a few years of this new coaching methodology taking over the game. With the Bills, Bengals, and Chiefs favored in the AFL, do you think the Dolphins can find a way to make it to Super Bowl 58 come February 11, 2024?